Today we're going to talk about relationality, and I thought it would be good to start actually by talking about trees to find our way into this concept that is so important and so life-changing. What makes a tree a tree? Now, that sounds like a weird question, right? But in relational terms, we would recognize that there's more to a tree than just the trunk and the branches and the leaves, because the tree thrives in sunlight, and it has pollinators, and it needs rain, even in the form of mist or the morning dew. And that precipitation comes from somewhere. It comes from the clouds, and the clouds are in the sky. And somehow that is implicated in the growth and the flourishing of the tree. So that's the idea that I'm trying to open up, right? That it becomes, the more we look at the world in a relational way, the more difficult it is to see things in terms of boundaries and parameters. That when we look at the world relationally, we actually start to see relationships and connections, interconnections stretching out further and further and further. And I chose to record the intro to this video sitting outside as I am, intentionally to get this richer audio. There are birds calling right now, there's a lot of traffic sound. There's occasionally a rustle of wind in the leaves. There's some insects buzzing. And it feels like that kind of also illustrates the point that I'm wanting us to grapple with now, is that things are implicated with one another. And I think in our modern, contemporary, fast-paced lives, we have become quite conditioned to want to separate things out. It's convenient, it's neat, but it doesn't really capture the fullness of what something is. This moment right now is fully what it is because of the crow calling in the tree behind me and the occasional of the vehicle driving past. And I'd like to be true to that in opening up this concept of relationality. But anyhow, let's head inside and keep chatting, because I also want to talk about, or a little bit more about, where does this idea of relationality come from? And because it's not a new idea, it's just new and challenging for us in these times. And why is it such an important idea for us in these times? And why does it seem so difficult to enact relationality? For a long time, I've grappled with this question: how do we live together better in this world? And I believe that in broad brushstrokes, the answer is to be found in relationality, in a relational understanding of the world. Relationality is the recognition that nothing exists in isolation. It is the idea that things, including people, are not fixed objects moving through the world, but part of what makes you a self at all. Everything is interconnected, which means that you are not an isolated point. It's a lot to ask of us, and I don't believe that our education systems, and certainly not our political systems and our economic systems, are designed to help us succeed in relationality. relational understanding of the world asks you to hold in your head and in your conscience not just this one thing in relation to a target over there, but to hold in your head the full entanglement of physical and abstract things across time and place. We've been led to believe that success means standing alone. We've been led to believe that nature is something out there, separate from our daily lives, something to be observed rather than something we're actually woven into. Now we see this playing out in social media. We're told to build a personal brand as if we're a product on a shelf, as if we're independent of our community. The way we're encouraged to curate ourselves online is deeply atomistic. Now, by atomistic, I mean the way social media can lead us to focus on the profile or the product as an isolated atom, rather than the presence and the process. In other words, how we show up for others. Here's why I believe it's so difficult to hold true to a relational view of the world. As complex as we humans are, we love a simple story with a clear line between the good guys and the bad guys. We love a good old story that takes us from here to there, from A to B. A story where the causes and the solutions are clear. X caused Y to happen, and so our characters did Z to resolve it. Done. But a relational understanding of the world laughs in the face of those kinds of simple linear stories. It's more like A causes B as much as B causes A. And X has in part been caused by Y, but it's also influenced by C, which happened 243 years ago, and by those people over there who happen to be D, and that's why they live in E, and they plant trees every September. Okay, that's a random example, guys. Don't overanalyze it. But I'm trying to illustrate the non-linearity and the complexity and the entanglement that actually characterizes reality, our world, in all its messiness and beauty. But it's exhausting. Those kinds of stories are not fun, they're not tidy, and they certainly don't lend themselves to marketing gimmicks and to political slogans. It's a lot, and there's more. Because once we recognize that we're all interconnected, we can no longer hover outside and point at them over there. We are tragically and beautifully, directly and indirectly implicated in all of it. I also want to share a few thoughts about what relationality is not. Just because a diagram shows things connected by arrows doesn't necessarily make it relational. Just because somebody talks about joining the dots or systems thinking or seeing the big picture doesn't guarantee that their argument is grounded in a relational understanding of the world. Here's a question that you can apply to a story or an argument, a theory or a belief to test the depth of its relationality. If we remove all of the relationships from this story, would anything remain? Would there be a self-sustaining entity that remains? If the answer is yes, you're probably dealing with some form of reductionist or atomistic thinking that's dressed up as relational thinking. In broad brushstrokes, I would say that relationality asks two main things of us: gifting our attention and remaining open and curious. The more we gift our attention to the world around us, the more we see and the more interconnections we recognize. Often it's by directing our attention to the mundane, ordinary things that we start to see things through new eyes. Our lifestyles, our social media, school curricula, travel itineraries, work deadlines, everything seems set up to keep us moving rather than looking, reflecting, connecting. Attention is an elusive, slippery thing. But there is a lot to see if we would just linger a bit with a single experience, a particular place, a certain person, and gift it our full attention. In that state of attentiveness, can we be curious instead of instructive? Can we be open to explore, learn, reflect, to understand that thing a bit more fully in its own terms? Be curious enough to ask, what is it about this mountain, this forest, this grassland that makes this particular flower possible? What does this partner, this parent, this neighbor need in order to flourish? In my experience, when we remain attentive and curious, the relationships that constitute even the most ordinary things become evident. And that's the key, right? Because once we see the connection, it's hard not to care.